The forest split open with the shriek of prey, silence ripped apart in an instant. A storm of claws tore through the night, and Eleanor whispered, "Run." The earth shook beneath James as lightning flashed, blinding, merciless. A mother wolf collapsed under a predator's jaws, her cry smothered before the pup could breathe. In the shadows, Daniel, the rival, watched, hunger etched in his stare. The pup's whimper rose into the storm, a fragile plea that vanished in thunder. The trees swayed like giants in battle, each gust a hammer of inevitability. "This night will not forgive," whispered Eleanor, voice sharp with dread. James stumbled, desperate to see through the rain, as the pup's fur bristled with terror. The world spun without mercy, and survival carved its first scar. The storm did not relent. It clawed at every branch, every breath. James shouted, "Stay close," but his voice drowned beneath the thunder. Eleanor stumbled on soaked earth, gripping her cloak tighter. In the distance, Daniel's shadow lingered, eyes gleaming with hunger. The pup whimpered, lost in the chaos, his fragile body dwarfed by the world. A crack split the night as lightning struck a tree, sending sparks into the rain. Eleanor gasped, fear carving her face. The predator wolf dragged the mother's body deeper into shadows, growls muffled in the storm. Nature had no mercy. The storm was not just weather, it was judgment. Eleanor said, "He's too small to survive this." James clenched his jaw, eyes fixed on the trembling pup. The forest roared with wind, branches tearing free and crashing. Daniel crouched deeper in shadows, patient, predatory. The pup struggled to rise, his legs slipping in mud. A hawk shrieked overhead, its wings caught in turbulent gusts. James muttered, "We cannot lose him now," his voice thick with defiance. Eleanor's hand trembled as she reached for the pup. Every sound was magnified. The storm, the thunder, the whisper of danger. Fear was no longer fear. It was inevitability. The predator's growl rolled through the storm, low and certain. The pup whimpered louder, pressed into Eleanor's arms. James stepped forward, eyes searching the dark body tense with defiance. Daniel's lips curved into the faintest smile as lightning carved his outline. Eleanor whispered, "He won't stop until one of us falls." Thunder hammered above, louder than fear itself. The air smelled of blood and rain. The forest floor turned to liquid beneath their feet, every step dragging them deeper. The night was no longer night, it was an open wound. The mother wolf's absence was a wound that no storm could wash away. Eleanor clutched the pup tighter, feeling its tiny heartbeat hammer against her chest. James said, "We move now, or we don't move at all." Daniel shifted, silent but watching, hunger painted on his face. The predator's eyes glowed briefly in the dark before vanishing into the storm. Rain washed blood into the soil, thin rivers of red beneath their boots. Eleanor whispered, "He has no one left but us." The night pressed down, vast and unforgiving, as the world closed around the pup's fragile cry. The storm had passed, but its memory clung to the forest like smoke after fire. Eleanor held the pup close, his tiny whimpers soft against her chest. James said, "He does not understand what he has lost." His eyes searched the pup's face, seeing fear etched into innocence. The ground still glistened with rain, every footprint sinking into sodden earth. A crow croaked from a shattered branch, its voice cracked like the forest itself. Eleanor whispered, "He has no mother to shield him now, only us." Daniel lingered beyond the trees, watching, patient, his silence more dangerous than any growl. The pup lifted his head weakly, eyes reflecting both hope and grief. James clenched his fists, shoulders weighed by choices he could not undo. The forest, though quiet, felt haunted. Every shadow whispered of hunger, of loss, of survival. Eleanor rocked the pup gently, though she knew comfort was fleeting. "We will carry him forward," she said, her voice trembling, but her arms steady. The pup pressed its face into Eleanor's cloak, as though searching for warmth that could not replace his mother's body. James crouched low, whispering, "He is fragile, but he is not broken." The forest smelled of wet earth and blood, both reminders of survival's price. Daniel's shadow moved along the ridge, his eyes never leaving the group, waiting. Eleanor said, "If we fail him, the wild will claim him before nightfall." Her voice was soft, yet sharp with fear. James touched the pup's paw with his calloused hand, surprised by its smallness, its pulse racing under fragile skin. The pup whimpered again, a cry that pierced James more deeply than any wound. The forest's silence was heavier than thunder. A fallen branch cracked in the distance, and Eleanor stiffened. Her arms tightened around the pup as though she could shield him from the world. "He will know us as his pack now," James muttered. "And we must prove worthy." The forest opened into a clearing, scarred by storm's fury. Fallen trees lay like corpses, their roots torn from soil. James said, "This ground holds death, but also life." Eleanor knelt, letting the pup sniff the broken earth, his tiny nose twitching. The pup whimpered, but then stepped shakily forward, his paws leaving faint prints in the mud. Daniel watched from the edge, his stillness unnerving, his gaze fixed on the pup's fragile attempt at strength. Eleanor whispered, "He learns even now, though the world has wounded him." James nodded, yet his eyes carried doubt, knowing nature would not forgive weakness. The air smelled of pine ripped open by lightning, sharp and raw. The silence broke with the flutter of wings as a hawk circled overhead. The pup lifted his head, eyes wide, as though daring the world to test him. Eleanor said, "He carries the weight of survival already, and he does not know it." Eleanor brushed mud from the pup's fur, her hands shaking, though she forced them steady. She whispered, "You must find your strength here." James said, "The forest does not raise the weak, it devours them." His voice was harsh, but it cracked with grief. The pup stumbled, then pressed himself against Eleanor's legs, seeking comfort he did not understand. Daniel leaned against a tree, half hidden, his gaze cold and calculating. His silence carried threat more than words ever could. Eleanor looked at James and said, "He is all that remains of her, and that must be enough." The pup whined softly, ears twitching at distant growls carried on the wind. James placed his hand on Eleanor's shoulder. "If he lives, he will change us more than we change him." The forest sighed with the sound of leaves dripping. And somewhere beyond the mist, another predator stirred. The pup's cry cut through the mist, small but piercing, echoing like a question the forest refused to answer. Eleanor rocked him gently, whispering, "We are your blood now." James stood nearby, arms crossed, though his eyes betrayed tenderness. Daniel's form shifted in shadows, his hunger gnawing, yet his patience unbroken. The air grew colder, the ground still slick with stormwater. Eleanor said, "He knows loss, though he cannot name it." The pup licked her hand weakly, eyes closing, but his chest still rose with stubborn rhythm. James muttered, "That heartbeat is the sound of defiance." The silence pressed against them all, heavy, merciless. In the distance, a wolf's howl broke through the haze, long, mournful, ancient. The pup stirred, ears twitching, as if answering an inheritance he barely understood. Eleanor tightened her grip, her voice breaking. "He must survive, for her, for us, for everything that breathes here." The forest no longer mourned, it threatened. Shadows deepened, wind slicing like knives through the trees. Eleanor held the pup tighter as his cries echoed. James said, "Every step draws danger closer." His boots sank into sodden ground, each stride heavy. From the ridge, Daniel followed in silence, his gaze never faltering. The pup whimpered, his tiny body trembling at unseen sounds. Eleanor whispered, "He feels what we cannot see." Branches cracked above, sending showers of bark across their path. James raised his arm defensively, eyes narrowing. Somewhere close, a predator exhaled, low, guttural, unseen. The silence after was worse than noise. Eleanor's breath caught, her heart pounding with the pup's. "We cannot falter now," James muttered, forcing himself forward. The forest had become alive, every shadow a hunter, every sound a promise of teeth. Their journey was no longer through wilderness, but through trial. The growl returned, louder, vibrating through the ground. Eleanor froze, clutching the pup closer. James hissed, "Keep moving." His voice cracked with urgency. The pup whimpered, pressing his face into her cloak. From the tree line, golden eyes blinked, unblinking, unyielding. Daniel leaned against a trunk, watching with a smirk faint as mist. Eleanor whispered, "He is hunted already, and he does not even know it." James drew his knife, the blade catching what little light bled through branches. The forest grew still, a suffocating pause before eruption. The pup squirmed, sensing more than sight could reveal. Eleanor's arms trembled under his weight. "We must prove we are more than prey," James said. His jaw set, every muscle tense. Behind them, the storm's echo still lingered in dripping leaves. Ahead, danger waited, its hunger sharpened by silence. A branch snapped, loud as thunder. Eleanor gasped, spinning toward the sound. The pup whimpered louder, claws digging into her cloak. James stepped forward, knife raised, his voice sharp, "Show yourself." Silence answered, heavy, deliberate. Daniel's outline flickered through trees, though his movements were ghost-like. The predator emerged, a wolf, larger than any they had seen, fur blackened with age and scars. Its breath steamed in the cold air, eyes locked on the pup. Eleanor whispered, "He knows who the true prize is." The pup squirmed, his tiny cry cutting through the night. James muttered, "We cannot outrun this." He planted his feet firmly, determination outweighing fear. The wolf growled, a sound that cracked the silence like stone breaking. Daniel smiled faintly, watching the tension stretch thin. The night felt endless, the outcome inevitable, survival reduced to a standoff. The predator wolf lunged forward, snapping jaws, then retreated into shadow, testing their resolve. Eleanor stumbled back, clutching the pup so tightly he whimpered in pain. James shouted, "Stand behind me." His knife glinted as he shifted stance. Daniel tilted his head, fascinated, unmoving. The predator circled, its paws silent on soaked ground. The pup cried again, louder, its sound carrying vulnerability and defiance together. Eleanor whispered, "He feels every shadow pressing against him." James muttered, "Then we give the shadows nothing." His breathing grew heavier, his grip white-knuckled. The wolf growled again, its sound vibrating through the clearing, making even the trees shudder. The forest closed in, darker with every heartbeat. Survival was no longer a distant challenge. It had teeth and eyes, and it demanded a price. The forest erupted, not in noise, but in silence so sharp it cut. Eleanor trembled, the pup's heartbeat racing against her chest. James said, "This ends in blood one way or another." His eyes locked on the predator, knife gleaming. Daniel stepped from the shadows, closer now, his smirk fading into something colder. The predator wolf lowered its head, muscles coiling, preparing for strike. Eleanor whispered, "He will die if we falter." The pup's cry rose, sharp, carrying into the night. James clenched his jaw, breath quick, every muscle alive with tension. The predator growled, a thunderous sound rolling like storm across soil. Daniel's eyes narrowed, voice soft yet cruel. "Only the strongest will claim this night." The air itself felt poisoned by inevitability. Eleanor braced herself, holding the pup tighter. The next heartbeat would decide whether life endured or vanished. The predator did not strike. Instead, she paused, her eyes fixed not on Eleanor or James, but on the trembling pup. Eleanor's breath caught. James whispered, "Why does she wait?" The wolf's growl softened, her chest rising in ragged rhythm. Eleanor gasped, "She is no hunter. She is a mother." The revelation cut deeper than any claw. The wolf's scarred body trembled, wounds old and fresh bleeding through fur. She stepped closer, not lunging but limping, her gaze never leaving the pup. Daniel's smirk faltered as the truth unfolded before him. The pup whimpered, ears twitching, his small cry answered by a faint whine from the predator. James muttered, She hunts not to kill, but because she has lost. The forest felt heavier, silence brimming with grief more than threat. Eleanor whispered, she sees herself in him. The storm's remnants wept from leaves, as though the sky mourned for both child and mother. The predator wolf lowered her head, not in preparation for attack, but as though offering surrender. Eleanor's voice shook, she has lost her own. James held his knife steady, though doubt darkened his eyes. Daniel sneered, do not mistake weakness for mercy. Yet the wolf's trembling revealed more than hunger. Her ribs showed through skin, her body frail beneath scars. The pup whimpered louder, squirming toward her, his cry sharp and unrelenting. Eleanor gasped, holding him tighter, yet torn between fear and instinct. James whispered, he calls to her. The wolf whined softly, the sound haunting, ancient, a mother's cry answered by a child. Daniel stepped forward, his boots crunching wet leaves. His voice low, taunting. One of them must starve, which will you choose? The forest listened, the silence thick, carrying truth heavier than violence. The pup cried again, louder, his voice piercing the mist. The predator wolf trembled, her body shaking with exhaustion. Eleanor whispered, he mourns with her. James muttered, this is not chance. This is survival reshaped. Daniel snarled. Survival does not care for grief. Yet his eyes betrayed unease as the pup squirmed toward the wolf's scent. Eleanor lowered her arms slowly, her breath uneven. James hissed, don't. But she whispered, he belongs to more than us. The wolf whined again, her voice fractured, desperate. The air shifted, the threat of death replaced by the weight of truth. Eleanor's arms shook, torn between protection and release. James tightened his grip on the knife, though his resolve faltered. The pup's heartbeat raced, as if sensing the choice. The forest watched in stillness, every leaf silent witness. Eleanor whispered, he is not hers, and yet he is. The predator wolf sank to her belly, pressing her body to the wet earth, a posture not of dominance, but of grief. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, whispering, she kneels. James stood frozen, his weapon useless against truth. The pup wriggled harder, his cry sharp, insistent. Daniel muttered, this is folly, though his voice cracked with doubt. Eleanor lowered the pup toward the ground, her arms trembling. James said, if you release him, we may lose him forever. Eleanor's voice broke, we already lost his mother. He should not lose the world as well. The predator whined, her scarred muzzle trembling as it neared the pup. The pup's cry softened, his nose twitching at her scent. The clearing held its breath, the air heavy with revelation. Nature in all its cruelty revealed not savagery, but fractured love. The pup pressed his nose to the predator's muzzle, a whimper softened into quiet recognition. Eleanor gasped, her hands hovering helplessly. James lowered his knife, his voice breaking. He is not afraid. Daniel scowled, his eyes flashing anger. This changes nothing, he spat, though his stance betrayed uncertainty. The predator wolf closed her eyes, pressing her forehead to the pup's tiny body. Eleanor whispered, she remembers. The forest wept softly with dew falling from branches, the storm's violence now distant. Pup's cry had turned into a sigh, as if finding what he had sought since birth. James whispered, perhaps survival is not only teeth and hunger. Daniel stepped back, jaw tight, unwilling to accept what he had seen. The predator lifted her head slowly, eyes glistening, her body still frail. Eleanor whispered, the truth is not death. It is what we carry beyond it. The fragile peace shattered. From the tree line came another predator, lean and ravenous, eyes like burning coals. Eleanor gasped, clutching the pup tighter. James shouted, we are surrounded. His knife gleamed as he spun toward the threat. The grieving wolf rose, her body frail, yet her growl fierce. Daniel smirked, stepping closer, whispering, this is how the wild decides. The pup whimpered, his cry drowned in thunderous growls. Eleanor whispered, We cannot fight them all. James set his stance, teeth clenched, every breath ragged. The rival predator lunged, snapping jaws flashing white. Eleanor stumbled back, the pup clinging desperately. The scarred wolf snarled, her body colliding with the intruder in violent fury. Daniel's eyes lit with hunger, watching chaos unravel. James muttered, "This night will bleed before it yields." Forest became battlefield, teeth, steel, and fear, locked in merciless struggle. The clash was thunder itself. The scarred wolf slammed the rival into mud, snarling, her teeth tearing flesh. Eleanor cried out, shielding the pup from flying dirt. James rushed forward, blade flashing, striking at snapping jaws. Daniel whispered, "Yes, bleed for him." The rival wolf twisted, teeth raking across the scarred mother's flank. Her howl split the clearing, a sound of fury and pain. The pup whimpered, his cry piercing Eleanor's heart. James slashed, blade biting into fur, crimson spilling into rain-soaked ground. Eleanor whispered, "It will kill her." James growled, "Better her than the boy." The rival twisted, lunging at Eleanor. James shoved forward, body slamming the wolf aside. Daniel's laughter echoed, dark and mocking. Thoris' silence was long dead. Only violence reigned. The ground shook under their struggle, life and death warring in raw, merciless chaos. The rival wolf broke free, blood dripping from jaws, eyes blazing with hunger. James shouted, driving his blade again, sparks flying as steel met bone. Eleanor fell to her knees, clutching the pup who screamed into storm air. The scarred wolf collapsed briefly, chest heaving, then rose with wild defiance. She threw herself again at the rival, her roar shaking the trees. Daniel muttered, "She cannot hold forever." James panted, "Then I will." His knife plunged, crimson spraying across his soaked tunic. The rival twisted, snapping, its teeth grazing James' arm, ripping skin. James roared, pain fueling fury. Eleanor screamed his name, her tears streaking with rain. The pup writhed, sensing his fragile lifeline slipping away. Daniel stepped closer, whispering, "Only death writes truth." The clearing spun with rage, fear, and sacrifice. Nothing but blood and will remained. James staggered, blood dripping from his arm, yet his knife stayed high. Eleanor cried, "You'll die." The pup's whimper cut through, fragile but commanding. The scarred wolf pinned the rival, jaws crushing its throat. Mud splashed as the two beasts writhed in brutal silence. Daniel's smirk faded, eyes narrowing, calculating the outcome. James pressed forward, blade sinking again, his roar shattering fear. The rival kicked, claws raking, but the scarred wolf's strength held. Eleanor whispered, "She fights for him as if he were her own." The rival gave one final thrash before collapsing into the muck, its breath fading into silence. James staggered back, chest heaving, knife slick with crimson. The scarred wolf growled low, her eyes meeting Eleanor's, bloodied but unbroken. Daniel hissed, "This changes nothing," though his jaw clenched in frustration. The pup whimpered, sensing the storm's peak had passed. The rival's body lay still, blood soaking into earth, silence reclaiming the clearing. James dropped to his knees, gasping, knife falling from his grip. Eleanor clutched the pup, whispering, "It is over." The scarred wolf staggered, blood dripping, her chest heaving. Daniel sneered, "Fools, the wild never ends with one fight." His eyes burned, his stance shifting closer. James rose again, body broken but eyes alive. "Then let it come," he muttered. Eleanor pressed the pup close, her tears mixing with rain. The scarred wolf limped toward them, her head lowered, her muzzle stained crimson. She growled faintly, not at them, but at Daniel. The pup whimpered, his voice soft yet defiant. Daniel's smirk vanished as he stepped back, unease creeping into his glare. The clearing felt sacred now, scarred by battle, yet bound by survival's truth. Eleanor whispered, "He is not alone. Not anymore. The storm broke at last, leaving silence heavy as stone. Eleanor clutched the pup close, his tiny chest rising in exhausted rhythm. James leaned on his knees, blood dripping from his torn arm. He muttered, "We survived, but survival has teeth." The scarred wolf limped past, her wounds deep, yet her eyes still fixed on the pup. Eleanor whispered, "She will not leave him now." Daniel stood at the edge, his cloak dripping, his glare sharp with frustration. He hissed, "One fight does not win the wild." James rose slowly, his breath ragged, his stance unbroken. The forest smelled of wet earth and blood, the air thick with aftermath. The pup whimpered softly, his cry not of fear, but of weariness. Eleanor pressed her cheek against his damp fur, whispering, "You are still here." The silence that followed was not peace. It was a reminder that survival never ends. The forest slowly exhaled, rain dripping like tears from broken branches. Eleanor whispered, "The night has taken enough." James pressed his wounded arm, grimacing, but his eyes never left the pup. The scarred wolf lowered herself into the mud, body trembling, blood mixing with rain. Daniel muttered, "She will not live another dawn." His voice carried venom and truth. Eleanor brushed the pup's fur gently, whispering, then she gave more than the world demanded. James knelt beside the scarred wolf, his hand hovering over her trembling frame. He whispered, "You fought for him when we could not." The pup whimpered, pressing his nose toward the wolf's bloodied muzzle. Her eyes fluttered, weak yet resolute. Daniel sneered, "Sentiment will not keep him alive." But the forest felt different now, quieter, as though even nature bowed to sacrifice. The scarred wolf's breathing slowed, each rise of her chest more fragile than the last. Eleanor whispered, "She has given everything." James bowed his head, his knife hanging loose at his side. The pup whimpered again, as though calling her back. Daniel said coldly, "The strong fall, the weak perish. The wild remains." Eleanor snapped, "And yet she fought when you did nothing." His eyes narrowed, but he stepped back, silence his only reply. The wolf's head lowered to the earth, eyes closing gently. James muttered, "She passes her fight into him now." The pup pressed against her chest, his tiny cry breaking into silence. Eleanor held her breath, tears streaking with rain, whispering, "Her strength will not be forgotten." The forest did not mourn with noise, it mourned with stillness. Even Daniel shifted uneasily, the truth undeniable. The scarred wolf's final breath slipped into the air, dissolving like mist. Eleanor whispered, "She is gone." The pup whimpered, paw pressing at her still body. James closed his eyes, voice low. "She gave him her place in the wild." Daniel muttered, "The forest does not weep." Yet his eyes flickered, betraying a shadow of unease. Eleanor lifted the pup, his body trembling but alive. She whispered, "He carries her fight now." James nodded, though his shoulders sagged with grief. The clearing felt heavier, her sacrifice carved into soil and silence. The pup licked Eleanor's hand faintly, his strength fragile but present. James murmured, "The wild has claimed her, but left him." Daniel turned sharply, his cloak whipping, unwilling to linger on loss. The forest sighed, branches swaying softly, as though carrying her memory. The clearing lay quiet, death and life bound together in fragile balance. Eleanor held the pup high, whispering, "You are what remains." James pressed his hand against her shoulder, voice steady but heavy. He must walk where she no longer can. Daniel's voice cut sharp. "And who will protect him when the next storm comes?" Eleanor glared, her voice unshaken. "We will." The pup whimpered softly, but his eyes no longer sought the dead. They looked forward, uncertain but alive. James whispered, "Her sacrifice is his inheritance." The forest stirred faintly, a breeze lifting broken branches. Daniel turned away, lips pressed thin, refusing to meet their gaze. Eleanor pressed her cheek to the pup, whispering, "You will not be alone again." The wild had taken, but it had also left something eternal. endurance carved from loss, fragile but unbroken. The forest lay still, its silence louder than thunder. Eleanor carried the pup close, her steps unsteady but unyielding. James walked beside her, his wounded arm bound in torn cloth. He whispered, "The storm has ended, but the wild never rests." Daniel trailed behind, his shadow stretched long, his eyes cold with unspoken intent. The pup whimpered faintly, yet his small cry did not echo with fear. It trembled with defiance. Eleanor whispered, "He hears the silence and answers it." The ground still bore scars of battle, blood mixing with rain, a reminder carved into soil. James pressed forward, jaw tight, shoulders heavy. Daniel sneered softly, muttering, "The next night will demand more." Eleanor's grip tightened, her voice firm. "Then we will give more." The forest's breath lingered in mist and fading dew, carrying memory forward, fragile yet enduring. Eleanor paused at a ridge where the forest opened wide, her gaze stretching over valleys scarred by storm. Pup lifted his head, ears twitching, his breath soft against her cheek. James whispered, "This world is vast, and it does not forgive." Eleanor replied, "Then we teach him to defy it." Daniel stood apart, his cloak whipping in the wind, his silence cutting deeper than words. The pup squirmed, weak yet restless, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Eleanor whispered, "He already carries more than he knows." James nodded, voice low, "He carries the weight of what we lost." The wind sighed across the ridge, scattering leaves like ashes. The pup's cry rose again, not weak, but sharp, piercing the vast silence. Eleanor's tears fell, though her voice steadied. "Let the world hear him." The pup's cry carried across the valley, sharp as a blade, fragile yet unyielding. Eleanor whispered, "He speaks for what has fallen." James muttered, "And for what must rise." Daniel's gaze narrowed, his voice sharp. "His cry will draw predators from every shadow." Eleanor said, "Then let them come." The pup trembled, but his eyes did not close. The horizon glowed faintly with morning light, but shadows clung beneath the trees. James' breath was ragged, his body still bleeding, yet his stance was unbroken. Daniel's lips curled into a faint scowl, unease carved in silence. The forest seemed to bow under the sound, a cry echoing against rock and mist, timeless as the wind. Eleanor whispered, "The world will not forget this voice." The forest answered with silence, but silence that carried memory. Eleanor cradled the pup tighter, his cry fading into small whimpers. James whispered, "He has spoken, and the world has listened." Daniel scoffed, his voice cold, "The world listens only to blood." Yet his eyes betrayed cracks, shadows of doubt he could not hide. Eleanor whispered, "Then let blood remember love as well." The pup nestled against her, weary but alive. James lowered his head, breath heavy, whispering, "This was never about victory, it was about survival." The clearing behind them lay scarred, the valley before them endless. Eleanor pressed her cheek to the pup, whispering, "He carries both the scar and the dawn." The valley stretched vast, the storm's memory fading into dawn. Eleanor whispered, "He will live." James nodded, his voice breaking, because she gave her life for him. Daniel turned sharply, his cloak vanishing into shadows, his silence his only answer. The pup lifted his head once more, his cry sharper, louder, a sound that pierced beyond the trees. Eleanor's tears glistened as she whispered, "He carries her echo." The sound rolled across the valley, fading into silence but lingering in the heart. James closed his eyes, whispering, "This is survival. This is truth." The pup's cry faded, but its weight remained. The last breath of the wild hung heavy, eternal.